to Grounds Patrol, a Newgrounds Creators podcast. I'm Will Comer, your host. We got a lot of love for the last episode of Crinkles and Swain. Thank you to everybody who listened to that. If you're here from that, welcome. I hope you enjoy your stay. Leave your jacket right there. Right over there, in the corner. I'm pointing to the corner of my room. Anyway, we got some good reviews for the last episode. I want to shout out some. Snail Pirate said, always loved the Madness series and have been excited for Nexus 2 for a while. Plus, Swain and Crinkles are just cool-ass people to begin with. Well, yeah. It would have been neat, he says, to have heard more of the interview during the episode. I at least don't mind it being over an hour long. Snail Pirate, thank you for saying that. I have gotten a few people saying that the interviews could be longer. I aim for Grounds Patrol episodes to be like 40, 50 minutes long, especially the big interview ones. And I'll tell you what's going on. Editing time. So I edit all of these episodes. I have a certain amount of time between the record and the release to get these episodes to you. And so in that time, I only have a certain amount of time to edit. And if it's 70 minutes long, I won't always have time to do all 70 minutes. So it's my balance of my work time and how much I can do to make it professional for you guys that will influence how long the episodes are. But I appreciate that feedback. And if you agree with Snail Pirate and you would want episodes to be longer more often, I appreciate that. And I can do what I can to work for you because I'm here for you guys. You guys are very, very important to me. And this is why feedback is super important. So I appreciate that. Let's do another. Ramush says, can't wait for MC Project Nexus 2. I finished the entire first game when I was really young, and I've always wanted a sequel. I'm really happy to see how devoted the guys are, and it makes me super duper happy. It makes me really happy too, and I loved the original Magnus interactive game on Newgrounds. That was like the game I played more than anything else in the entire world back then. I remember my favorite part of it was the knife throwing. I would always get the knife over any gun because the knife you can just like swing your arm wildly around like a crazy person and just stab. And there was like a knife throwing mini game. I would try to see how many knives I could throw. It was fun. God, I love that game. So yeah, the fact that they're making more stuff like that, right up my alley. Thank you for saying that. Which leads me, not really, but here we go anyway, to my interview with Aimee Smith. Aimee has been in things like Battle Right, where she plays Alicia, the awesome Ice Queen. She's in Freedom Planet and the Aphmau series. She is a prolific and professional and full-time voice actor. Also, as an Australian, she has a lot of things to say about the Australian game dev community and the Australian voice acting community. There was a lot to talk about with her, and I had a lot of fun. This was our first time meeting, and by the way, us meeting sounded like this. My name is Will. Hi.
Hi, Will. I'm Aimee.
Hi. So one reason I was excited to talk to Aimee is because I also have acting experience, which I will talk about at the very beginning of this. So kind of like actor to actor, it was fun to compare notes and see what it's like on this side of it and on that side of it. And we talk about all sorts of other things. It's a fun time. Enjoy. I've worked with voice actors in the past. I actually did a stint in college of producing voice actors, like being behind the microphone and the mixing board.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and I also, this is actually something that I've never talked about on the podcast before, but I am also an actor. I have an agent for film and TV acting too.
Nice. That's excellent. Do you have one for voiceover as well, or is it purely for stage and film that you're interested in?
Just film and TV is what I have an agent for. I've always been interested in voice acting, which I think is a common thing to say, but I've never pursued it. One thing that's always held me back is my living situation. Like, I live in a studio apartment.
Oh, right. Are you living with other people as well?
Yeah, I live with my partner. So she and I live together in a studio, and it's like I don't really feel comfortable enough having a booth or a setup. You should see me right now. I'm recording on my couch in my bed living room with my laptop here beside me. That's kind of how bohemian it is.
That's all right. But you know what? Like, it's the same as voice actors who end up going on a vacation or something, and they end up just having like the duvet over them while recording with their laptop. And like, there's some really nifty little ways. And the producer the producer or the director has no idea that it's even been recorded somewhere else. So it's like we spend thousands of dollars on our recording setups. And in the end, sometimes you can just take a little USB mic, like a really, really small amount of space, the duvet, and you're set and nobody's none the wiser. Yeah.
Well, you hear stories in music documentaries about like, yeah, we recorded this on the road and we went into the closet of our hotel and recorded like in the middle of the towels.
Yeah, that's it. Like, some of the stories are crazy. Like, even long road trips where they're on the road for like 10 hours or whatever, and they get like a really sudden job and they have to pull over and they like dampen all the back of their car and they like block it all off and they record huge jobs there. Yeah. So it's great. So really, you can make it happen. If they can do it, you can do it.
If they can do it, I can do it. Did you hear the story of how they had to do they had to punch in for one of Mike Myers' lines in Shrek? And it was after they wrapped and everything. They had to drive a van to where Mike Myers was and like set up a recording setup in the back of the van and record his one line.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised I just didn't get somebody to step in. But mind you, he does have a very unique tone as well. He stands out.
Yeah, it must have been some kind of key line too. I don't know. But that was fun.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy what people go through to just record that last line.
Yeah. But yeah, voice acting is always something I've been interested in. And working with people has always gotten me interested in it too. But so I am excited to talk to you. This is a field I always am interested in talking about, but I never get to.
Oh, that's great. Well, me too. So this is going to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be honest. I looked at, I did my research. I looked at the things that you've been in and the projects, and I don't recognize any of them personally.
Oh, that's okay. No worries.
Yeah. The biggest one is it Alicia from Battle Right? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is typically the one that people recognize. But yeah, Alicia from Battle Right. That was a cool little gig.
Yeah. And that, if I'm right, I'm not enough of a gamer to be able to fully, it's like a multiplayer online battle game where there's a lot of different characters. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of seen in a few different ways. Like a lot of people are referring to it as a MOBA and others aren't. And I don't know, it gets a little bit complicated to that degree because obviously games today, they're all like multi-genre. It's not just a platformer anymore. It's not just an RPG. It's like an RPG with battle-like turn-based tactics or like it just gets really, really strange.
The genres are getting so blended together. It's all becoming, you have to have 6 words to describe any kind of game nowadays.
Yeah, that's exactly it because there's just inspirations being drawn from everywhere.
Yeah. And doesn't this game also have its own Battle Royale kind of offshoot game too? It seems that there's 2 projects.
Yeah. So it was Battle Right originally, and then it ended up blending off into Battle Right Royale. I'm going to sound really ignorant in that I don't know the complete difference. I think that the Royale one is a little bit more open world as far as I'm aware. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think the Battle Right originally was more of an arena type battle game. So I think that's the main difference, but I'm sure that somebody will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you also don't understand much of it. We're in the same boat.
Because I love games. Like I love playing video games, but yeah, I can't say I've played Battle Right yet. Yeah. But at some point I'm sure I'll stream it.
The character of Alicia reminded me a lot of Frozen. I'm sure you get that a lot. You get the Ice Queen.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, very, very Elsa inspired, particularly with one of her skins as well, which is very much in line with the movie. But yeah, I was really surprised to get that role because typically as a voiceover artist, you have an idea of what your voice type kind of is. And I just auditioned for that one on a whim, completely forgot about it. And then of a morning I got it and I was like, oh, I'm so surprised. I really didn't think it was... I didn't think I was pulling it off, and sometimes that's just the way with voiceover too. It's crazy.
Don't you love that? I've had that situation too, where you do so many auditions that you completely forget about 99% of them. They just become part of your life.
Yeah, and
then you get a call one morning. It's like, hey, you got the role of blank, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. What?
Yeah, and then you go back over your emails, and you're like, what was this one? But I did remember this one only because it was with Sound Cadence, and I've really wanted to work with them for ages. So I did remember this one. I was just surprised, very, very shocked. But yeah, no, I love that. I love that sometimes you can hear something very differently than what the client can hear. Yeah, so it just like opened up a few more possibilities as to what my vocal type, like what are my bookable vocal types. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, you would get that with stage and screen quite a lot as well.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So Alicia was kind of like a more serious character, kind of like a cool, high power, high status character, right?
Yeah, she is. I think that the main surprising factor is that when I consider my vocal type, I don't necessarily say, oh yeah, I'm good at doing young girls or like anything like that. I more see it as a type of energy, and I just see that a lot of the roles I tend to book are much higher in energy, whether it's just they're very animalistic in nature, whether they're a little bit ditzy, whether they're like yelling all the time. I just find that like high energy is my comfortable space. And so with Alicia, she's not necessarily low energy, but she's just the power is very internal. And so you have to have a way of conveying that power that isn't over the top and yelling and anything like that. So it was about really harnessing that energy. And so I found that I needed to use a lot of arm movements just to create that tenseness in my body to convey control and power. So it was really interesting. Yes, it was just like I felt like I wanted to burst, but I was like, no, keep it inside and just
Wait, were you also sitting down for this recording?
Yeah, I was, because I don't anymore. Since I've moved into my new place, I have my own little constructed home studio. So I stand all the time, and as I mentioned before, I don't have a stool, so I have no choice this time. Mm-hmm. But previous to this year, I was always sitting down because my home studio was attached to my computer and everything, and I kind of just had screens surrounding my whole setup and like a little makeshift door sort of thing. So I sat for every single role that I did, which is very weird given my vocal type as well, being very high energy. I'm sitting, so
right. It's hard to get that kind of energy forward when you're sitting down.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's just a little bit in my nature anyway. I'm a little bit of a chatterbox, a little bit. I'm pretty dynamic, so I find it hard to tone it down sometimes. So it was an interesting, challenging role. So it was really surprising.
That's cool. What did you say the company was that you were excited to work for?
Oh, so it was Sound Cadence, but so Battle Right is actually developed by Stunlock Studios. But I actually was really fortunate to meet with Sound Cadence back in 2016 when I went over to the States, because I'm in Australia, if you couldn't tell by the accent. Mm-hmm. So I'd actually met Marissa Lenti and Amber Lee Connors, and they're just amazingly lovely and incredibly talented. And I've been on their roster for a couple of years, and I was just like, oh, they direct and produce such great games, and I would really like to actually work with them on something. It ended up being conducted through Skype back in 2017, I think it was. It was just like my own little personal but professional goal as well, that I'd wanted to work with them. So it meant a lot, and it was also my first like professional studio gig as well, even though I was at home. Like the actual developer was quite large scale. So it was my first job in working with a team that wasn't indie.
When you say conducting, this is something I've been interested in. So when this is a recording session going on, you're in your home, it's remote, and you're recording, but they're also with you so they can direct you kind of through Skype?
Yeah, so with a lot of my work, I generally just do it on my own, but other than a couple of like really unique gigs that only offer directing via Skype or Discord, or if you have Source Connect or ISDN or IPDTL or any of those other live directed services where they can record it from their end as well. But so for this particular one, it was just through Skype, and I recorded it from my end, and I had sent it over at the end as well. So it was really good. They're just like, as is, send over, and we'll have a play with it.
Cool. And they're listening to you record it, and they're giving you notes. So they're saying, oh, that was great. So this time I'd like you to be more subtle, or et cetera, right? Yeah,
so the feedback happens in real time as well, which is really cool, because obviously with being an online voice actor, you're not necessarily in a studio all of the time as well. So it's like, for me, those really important moments that actually give me that real-time feedback, because you're self-directing for so much of the job. So it's really enlightening to actually be speaking to somebody while you're doing it and be like, oh, am I doing it right? Am I doing it differently? Oh, I never thought about doing that alternate take. So it's so valuable. So even though it can just be a half an hour session, you learn so much more than if you were doing it self-directed for a month. So I love it. I really value those moments.
What's the situation usually like? Is it that a director will give you a script and then have you read everything, and then they'll listen to the batch of everything that you recorded and give you notes on every individual thing like that?
Oh, you know what? It changes all the time. And obviously, like, the voice artist might request different things than what the next voice artist might ask for as well. But generally what I like to do is just offer an audition first, and I like to do that with everything, because it just kills me when I feel like I'm giving the client what they want. I do the whole script and it might be 1,000 words, and they're like, oh, actually not really liking that voice type, can you make it a bit deeper? Yeah. And I just go, oh no. So even if it's just 2 or 3 sentences, send it through. I might offer a few takes if I'm feel like I'm giving the client exactly what they want, but it might sound cool in another accent, or it might sound cool if I put in a little bit more raspiness. So I generally do one that they ask for and I think that they want, and I give them one that they might not have necessarily expected. Then they might say yay or nay, or can you do it this way? Offer them one more, and generally if they want another revision after that, I'm probably not the right voice actress for them. So I kind of see it as do the first one, giving them what they want, the second one to revise anything, and then after that we should be launching straight into the script. And it can completely change depending on what the director is like as well. But I generally just ask for the script, the voice type if it hasn't been completely clarified just yet, character concept art as well, which would be great. But then I give them everything. I give them 2 takes of every single line, send that through, and if they want any revisions due to audio issues or due to mispronunciations, I do it all for free. But if they would like an alternate take or something, I'll attach a small charge with that as well. So you still receive feedback in that regard. They might just say, oh, can we put the emphasis on this particular word, or they're actually feeling really sad at this moment and it's more of an internal monologue, or whatever it might be. So you still get that feedback, but that real-time feedback is what's so valuable because you're in that right headspace and you can make those immediate changes.
Yeah. I just remember from like when I was helping as the producer of it, I guess you're sitting with the director of an animation and you are monitoring the soundboard and you are like controlling when it's recording, when it's not recording. But I just remember the role gets built in the studio a little bit sometimes when you're in person. You and the director and the voice actor work as a 3-part harmony. You kind of together figure out exactly what everything sounds like. It's very cool. So I was wondering if it's remote, how does that connection happen?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's why I do love live directed sessions, because that's what's really cool. Like, it's still a collaboration process, and it's very hard to come up with this amazing character completely on your own, because sometimes you get a little bit stuck in your ways and you're like, oh yeah, I think it should sound like this. But then when you have other opinions as well, you're just you're branching completely outside of your comfort zone, and that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really exciting.
If in the future, if you have directors who are kind of on the edge and they're kind of going towards you recording back everything yourself and recording it, would you ever say, hey, have you considered doing a live recording session with me on Skype?
I do. I actually do provide a charge for it now. So that might be a little bit of a deterrent. I personally, it gets a little bit tricky because in my first few years of doing voiceover, like if anyone wanted a live directed session, I'd happily do it. But then I'd find it would kind of venture off into like talking about unrelated things, and sometimes what was supposed to be a half an hour session launches into 2 hours, or I found some directors kind of take a little bit of advantage just ever so slightly because they want another live directed session to redo some lines. And I've had some little horror stories like that, and I'm like, in the end you do need to charge for your time as well. So even though I do love doing it, it's also the assurance that the director's going to get exactly what they want. So that's why as of now I do charge for it, just because of a few instances in the past. But if it's a long-term client as well, and they're just like, oh, we're doing this really big gig at the moment and we're really excited about it, we want it right, I might provide a discount, or it kind of just depends on if it's a new relationship or I trust them and they kind of know how my system works and those sorts of things. So there are a lot of variables in place. It's just a couple of instances I've had, I'm like, oh, I think I might need to change my system a little bit.
Gosh, this is fascinating. You're sort of in a new position where you're half contracted actor and you're half like gig economy, almost like a graphic designer or something. Like you have a client and you give them a certain amount of things and it's notes, and this is a job I don't think has existed much until like recent years, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Very Wild West.
Yeah. Well, I just mean like, I don't even think Source Connect and ISDN and everything really, I mean, I'm sure it existed, but it wasn't like a huge thing in every studio, but I don't necessarily have it in my studio at the moment either. I'm hoping to have it by the beginning of next year at the latest. But yeah, it really wasn't a thing when I started about 8 years ago. It was really just Skype, because I don't even think Discord existed at that point either.
Right.
So yeah, the connectivity of the internet has just created this booming voiceover industry as well. So it's, every second person's a voice actor now. So it's crazy. It's huge. And I suppose the same can be said for like indie game developers and like everything, every field that revolves around the internet has just completely boomed as a result of all of these different networks and technological devices.
Right. I feel like it's like the jobs are now trying to catch up to the technology. That's how I feel as a contractor of anything online. It's now that everything is so much more accessible now, the job systems and the payment systems and the contracts are just struggling to catch up.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that with working at home and using technology to connect you from outside of your home as well, I think that it needs how do I explain this? The mindset of charging for your time needs to be really dominant. And I think that's the difference between doing this as a hobby and doing this as a business as well, because particularly with voiceover, some people might say, oh yeah, it's going to take me 15 minutes and it's $100 to do this particular explainer or whatever the type of work might be. But then you need to think about the fact, well, you're at home, so you actually need to put 30% of that aside for tax. Then you need to think about your superannuation. And it's just that idea of your time, or some people who do free projects and all that kind of thing, or give their live directing services away, which is kind of what I was referring to earlier as well. And then you get caught up in a call for about 2 or 3 hours, not necessarily going through the script, and it's like you need to put a price on your time. So I think that's a little bit hard for people when they're working from home, and it's something that I've needed to kind of check in with quite a lot.
That's so hard to do. It is so hard. And it feels almost like an environment where it's not very readily available to learn how to do it. There aren't many things online telling you how to price yourself and how to find your rate and how to price a contract for people. It's kind of like you got to find out yourself. And if you don't charge enough for your stuff, you're undercutting the market and everybody hates you. But we're not going to tell you how to price yourself.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And you know what? I would speak to my husband about this all of the time, and he doesn't get it. And I think it was a little bit easier for me because I was a teacher, so I didn't necessarily have a rate per hour. I would work outside of those hours all of the time. But with him and a lot of other people working on an hourly rate, they kind of look at voiceover and like, wow, you did that 1 gig in 15 minutes and it was $100. And it's like, yeah, but with voiceover, you're not working 9 hours a day. Like, you're not in the booth recording 9 hours a day. It doesn't quite work that way because you're working out your tax information, you're doing your invoices, you're doing your marketing an hour to 2 hours a day as well. So you're cold emailing, you're cold calling, and you're updating your websites and doing your social media, because now that can be very productive. It's not just a time waster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you're not actually in the booth doing 9 hours a day unless you have a shit ton of e-learning and that sort of thing. You're likely to be caught up in there. But particularly for video game work, it doesn't work that way. The jobs are fewer and far between. So it's about really charging accordingly. But yeah, it can get really difficult.
And by the way, to anybody listening, I'm sorry, we'll get into more fun stuff later, but I'm personally very interested in financing a gig economy. So I'm really hone into this conversation.
Yeah, but I am too, because even looking at like my website analytics yesterday, I think it was, like, it's all intriguing because it drives further business. And yeah, it blows my mind because I knew it would be more business driven this year, but I'm trying to keep up with it all because there aren't a lot of classes available. So I would mainly be going to peers or like stalking Industry Pro Facebook pages and that sort of thing, just to attain a little bit more information, because there's nothing, like, particularly in Australia, there's nobody saying, oh, well, to plan for your voiceover business, you need to do this. So
no. And also the things are priced, you make a certain amount of money for these gigs because it's structured so that you can do a certain amount per year and still make enough to get by, right? Like, you're not doing a 40-hour work week here. You're getting what auditions you can and what gigs you can. And if you didn't get enough money for these certain things, you wouldn't be able to make a living because there's too many actors and there's not enough projects out there. That's just how it is.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone thinks that, oh yeah, but that's what you're getting every single day. And it's like, no. Yeah. Like, some days you might be getting $1,500 and then other days it's like you might get $50. Like, it's just the inflexible nature. And that's why when you do get jobs, you do need to charge accordingly, or you're going to be screwed on those days where you have absolutely nothing. So yeah, but in terms of like the 40-hour work week, like, I feel that I still definitely work that, like, whether it's an interview, like obviously what we're doing now in order to increase a little bit more publicity or hopefully expand the business, or just in terms of networking, or like, it can be seen in so many ways, but it still is for the business as well. But yeah, as I said, your marketing, like, every single day I'll be doing cold emails to a particular focus. So it might be production houses on Monday. I think I do Twitter on Tuesday. So that's where I'd like stalk the hashtag indie dev scene as well. Or I'd like contact some developers directly. Wednesdays, what am I doing today? I haven't even written it down yet. I haven't gotten that far.
I do the same thing. Yeah. I do my Twitter on Saturdays. Do you use like Hootsuite or a social media platform to schedule it out a little bit?
I do. I use Hootsuite, but I only use it in terms of actually scheduling out my tweets. I don't use it for... Oh, no, I'm thinking of TweetDeck now. But I use Hootsuite just for scheduling tweets. If there's any other function associated with Hootsuite, I don't quite understand it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I've been trying to do the same thing for this podcast. I have a day where I schedule out the tweets. And by the way, anybody who's mad at that, they're still my tweets and it's still my language and I'm like talking to my people, but it's just a way of doing it so that I can have one tweet a day for a week.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, like particularly with the amount of social media as well. I personally use it to make sure that I've covered all bases. So I'll have my tweet for Twitter, Instagram and Facebook to go out at the same time. And also because I predominantly have an American audience, I want to make sure that it's at the prime time for Americans. And if I want to be sleeping at 6 a.m. and I want to get up at 7, I can schedule it for that 6 a.m. So that's prime time in America. But yeah, it's still completely your content. So yeah, I don't really see it being a problem. In fact, I find it's kind of cool because you're like this omnipotent force on your own social media. So you're not actually there, but it's kind of like you are. I think it's awesome.
Sometimes I'll log into Twitter in the morning when I wake up and just be like, I'll see a tweet that I sent earlier in that morning and be like, oh, that's fun.
It's super cool. I love it.
All right, we should probably stop talking about social media scheduling and
and the business side. People are like, boring.
I could talk about that all day because this is what I do, but everybody else is like, God, what is this finance podcast?
But I find it really intriguing, but that is a huge part of voiceover for me. Like sometimes you might only be recording an hour a day, but the rest of the time is all of that other stuff. So for anyone who's considering making the shift from hobby into full-time business, it is really what you need to know as well.
Yeah. You know, as I'm in the world of this kind of gig economy, art, creative endeavors, it surprises me and is sort of interesting to see that so many people online, especially on Newgrounds. I guess this is a Newgrounds podcast. I should say that word Newgrounds once, but people will do a lot of stuff for free as collaborations, and they'll work together to create art. And it seems a lot of time there's not a single dollar traded one way or the other.
Well, I have to say, I looked into your podcast quite a lot as well. And, I actually got my start to a degree on Newgrounds as well. So I'm pretty sure everything I did on there was free. But I think it's important to note as well that the creators aren't necessarily generating a revenue as well. So in those sorts of cases, it is all right to work for free. Like if you see it as a hobby, there's a small, very, very small revenue associated with Newgrounds, but not enough to make it worth it by any means. But in those sorts of collaborative, fun environments, it's totally okay to do that. It's just as soon as there's a revenue associated with it, or it's a larger developer, or it's going to Steam or PlayStation or whatever, then it's like, please charge for your work. Exactly.
And as much as that creates a wealth of amazing art and creative content with no paywall, you can enjoy it for free. I do I guess all I worry about is that down the line, you're not going to have enough experience with monetizing your own stuff, and you're not going to be able to make that leap into doing it for a career, right? Or doing it to support yourself.
I mean, it takes a long time, and some people are luckier than others, but I know that for the first, maybe 2 years, I generally just did free work, and then there were a couple of gigs that were like, $20, $50, whatever, just more as a gesture as opposed to setting my rates. And this was back in a time where there weren't too, it was still a huge business, but now it's multiplied times 10, the amount of voice actors who are out there. But setting rates and setting appropriate rates, I feel is a very tiered step-by-step system, because my rates over the last 2 years have gone up, and I think that it's a good time to up your rates as soon as you have a new demo, or as soon as you get a new microphone, or as soon as you have a new setup, or as soon as a huge gig has come out. So if you can, every 6 months to a year, you might just step up your rates ever so slightly, eventually reaching those GVAA rates as well. So I feel it can be a process because you don't, particularly with games as well, you could be working with a developer for 2 to 3 years. And so in that space, if you're going from nothing to, now I charge the $250 per hour with a 2-hour minimum, so it's actually $500 USD for this 20-minute piece of work that you want done, isn't going to work out. So I know that with my rate system, sorry, we're going back to finances again, I've just realized.
I know, I'm doing the same thing too.
Yeah, but it's just it's about being considerate of who the developer is as well. So I know that I have a set rate for games that are completely free. I personally don't do any free work anymore. As much as I'd like to, I can't do a zero amount for my time anymore. I just find I can't do it anymore, but other voice actors can because they're building a portfolio, and that's totally fine if there's no revenue. I don't think that there's any harm in that. But if I'm working with an indie developer and they are getting a small amount of revenue, if the game's coming to Steam or mobile or whatever, I then have a different amount, which is obviously a bit higher, a lot higher, and then I actually have my studio amount for large developers who aren't indie.
Interesting.
Yeah, if it's a 1 or 2 person indie team, I'm not going to charge them the same as a large studio. I think it's not fair, and in the end, you don't want to destroy this project because they've put in all their money for voiceover. They don't have the same funding. And I know in Australia in particular, like I would feel awful to do that because I know the funding that is available, and I know in New South Wales it's basically non-existent, so I'm not going to charge them the same.
You're talking about the Australian game dev industry, right?
We've had so many studios shut down in Australia since 2011, and our last huge studio ended up shutting down in 2015 as well, which is 2K. So they had produced BioShock and Borderlands the pre-sequel, so it was actually done here in Australia. But then they ended up shutting down. So that was our last AAA studio, and now we're mainly just comprised of indies. So yeah, so I think it's about being really fair as a voice actor as well.
So you say you get a lot of your market from the United States. You do a lot of remote work, and a lot of it's across the seas. There's still an impetus for you to work with Australian developers and creators? Is it kind of a home team kind of thing? You want to make sure you're repping Australia?
Yeah, I do, because I think that a lot of Australian developers, they don't know where to find voice talent, and they're also scared at how much it's going to cost as well. So I find that they're either doing no voiceover, or sometimes they'll get an American talent just because they find it's a little bit easier to access, which I know sounds a little bit crazy. It's just that it's not, video game voiceover isn't typically explored by agencies here in Australia as well. So we're mainly known as a corporate commercial industry for voiceover. Okay. So I know that in terms of, I feel like I've attained quite a lot of video game work, but when I've gotten in contact with agencies, like they love it and they think it's cool, but they don't necessarily receive any of that work. So they don't really have a place for me. So I still feel it's really important that at least that's something I'm utilising in networking as well, because it is really different and we make such great games. But when the funding isn't there, it's very hard to get them outside of Australia as well.
If there was more stuff going on in Australia, do you think you'd be doing more like in-person studio sessions and going and meeting directors in person?
If there was video game work, for sure. Like I still do a lot of commercial and corporate, but not at the place where it needs to be yet for that agency, considering that that's all of that they receive. But if there was more funding, I would like to think so. I'd like to think I'd be considered for some of these games.
For sure.
But yeah, like I still work a lot like with heaps around Australia, like little one-on-one, 2-people teams. Like one of the biggest I've worked with is Blowfish Studios, which are in North Sydney, and they have a much larger team. But yeah, I personally just love it. Like I know it sounds crazy, but when I get cast as an Australian game, I just feel this sense of pride. Because I know that,
I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, like it's just really cool. Like there's been particular weeks where I've gotten like a really, really great American gig and I've had an Australian gig at the same time. And I just feel this like just immense sense of pride because I know how hard it is here because we really only have funding in Western Australia and Victoria. So we have a lot of other states that are completely neglected for funding. So it's really hard.
If there's a way to support the Australian game dev community, what can we do? Especially if we're here in America listening to this.
Yeah. So I know that at the beginning of this year, so it was the Australia Day Steam sale as well. So it was from, I think, January 25th through to the beginning of February. There are a heap of Australian games that were on sale. And I think at the moment there is still the Nintendo Switch sale on at the moment. So I think they had about 12 Australian games all for sale. And I believe it's still going now. So it's really just a matter of supporting the games because there are some, like we've had some great games come out of Australia. Like we had, it's crazy, but one of the best mobile games. So we had Fruit Ninja come out of Australia, which is by Half Brick Studios. But it's like...
Fruit Ninja's coming from Australia? Yeah. I had no idea.
Yeah, so it was developed here by Half Brick Studios. But it's like we don't want to be renowned for... like a mobile game. It's like we have some great RPGs and some great visual novels and that sort of thing. And like there's a great brawler coming out very soon as well. So Brimstone Brawlers, which is this game I'm a part of as well. And it's by Christopher Galea. And I just look at this game and I think, oh, if the funding was there, like who knows how far this game could go. So it's just a matter of like give them a follow when their games come out, like play the demos, give it advice, stream it, purchase it. But at the moment, the Nintendo Switch Australian one is huge for a little bit more exposure of the games that are coming out of Australia. So I really recommend that.
Are there any specific games you're talking about?
Yes, so Siegecraft Commanders by Blowfish Studios at the moment, that's on there, I believe. I think Storm Boy as well, they're by the same studio. What else is on there? There is... Oh, The Adventure Pals. It's actually, I love this game. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's by Massive Monster. And it's really adventure time and... Castle Crashers. It's like Adventure Time meets Castle Crashers. And I've actually played it with my husband, so it's co-op as well. And it's so much fun. Hand of Fate 2 is on there by Defiant Dev, so all Australian. I haven't played it, but I've heard great things about it. But they're the ones that I would personally put my stamp of recommendation on.
Cool. They'll appreciate that. That's really nice.
That's great.
So, okay, fun change of topic. When you're doing a work for more American audience, do people ask you to do an American voice or do different accents, or are they getting you more because of the Australianness?
I find that I need to meet their specs first, and typically that's going to be American, and then my alternate take, when I feel it might apply in this particular role, I might give the Australian accent as my alternate take. I find that this year, though, I'm being cast a little bit more as an Australian, because in the beginning when I started my career, I wouldn't advertise it at all. I didn't even want to say that I was Australian, nothing, because I felt like people would be hunting out my little vowel changes and stuff. Like, they would pick apart my audition a little bit. It's just this fear you have. So I just wouldn't talk about the fact I'm Australian. I would just get rid of that. And then when I'd be cast as an American, I'd feel like really, really proud that I got it over some people who are actually American. But now I feel I'm at the place where my portfolio for American jobs is high enough where I can say now that, look, I can definitely do the American accent. You can see these jobs here, but I am also Australian, and they can see that now. I do advertise that quite a bit. So I have, as of this last year, I have people approaching me more for Australian-based jobs. Sorry, not in Australia, but Australian-accented jobs. Yeah. So it's
fascinating.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not something I would advertise in the beginning. And even to Australian voice actors now, I would still say 90% of the work is American, so make sure you have a really good American accent.
Yeah. So, okay, if I ask you a question, can you answer in an American accent?
Sure, I can try.
Oh, boy. How's your day been so far? What did you do today before sitting here right now?
Yeah, it's been really good. So yesterday I ended up doing a little bit of voiceover. So I think it was 5 auditions yesterday. I did, I can't even think now. Sorry, it's so bad. I was like, oh my God, if I had content to talk about, maybe. I can't even think about what happened yesterday. What did I do?
I tried to phrase that a bit more like, I wanted to give you something to talk about, because I hate it when people are like, ooh, do an accent. Oh, do an accent for me. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. It was a good way
like, what do I talk about?
Yeah, and then I was like, what did I do yesterday? Oh my goodness.
Crap.
That's so bad.
In the past, I've said, what did you eat for breakfast today? And then people will be like, I didn't have breakfast. And I'll be like, okay, number 1, eat breakfast. And number 2, we had nothing to talk about.
And it's like, okay, what did you eat for lunch?
Yeah, exactly. I haven't eaten in 5 days. Okay, good.
Okay, you got problems.
Yeah. One of the roles that you did is a character named Tara, and it's from a series called The Minecraft Diaries, which is a series by somebody named Aphmau.
Yep.
And I don't recognize any of the words I just said, except for Minecraft, I think.
No worries. Basically, what I kind of like to do, because I go to quite a lot of Australian conventions as well, and I like to talk about voiceover and Australian game developers and everything. So I kind of like to talk about 3 particular roles, and one is Mila from Freedom Planet, because it was kind of like this massively successful indie game, and it just exceeded all expectations. So I like to talk about Mila because some people have generally heard about that. I like to talk about Alicia because it's not an indie game as well, so it's got quite a large fan base. And then number 3 is I like to talk about Tara from Aphmau, and that's kind of like your younger high school audience. So I've been to like some schools and stuff, and they're like, oh my gosh, you voiced in Aphmau, so they haven't heard of anything else, but they generally hear about that because she's got a following of, last time I checked, it was 4.5 million people.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's got a huge fan base, but I kind of thought it was all over in the States. But sometimes when I do conventions and stuff, there are some girls in Australia who watch it as well. But yeah, so those are kind of my 3 that hits like different kinds of audiences, different demographics.
Yeah, for sure. It freaks me out so much that there's something that's so successful, that has so many followers, and I have not only have I never heard of it, I can barely grasp what it is.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, Aphmau, or they have no idea.
Yeah,
but it's hard because like,
Aphmau?
Yeah, it's hard though because it's something that we necessarily wouldn't have watched. And like, I didn't watch it before I got cast in it, but I saw a lot of voice actors announce that they were a part of it. And I'm like, okay, obviously this is like a pretty big deal. And then I started, like, I actually had a look at her follow account and the fact that she has merch. And Aphmau is crazy popular. So it was like a little bit of a personal, like, yay, I get to be a part of it and be with all these other amazing, cool voice actors. Yeah, so a really cool gig, and it's nice to voice for something because I'm a former primary school teacher as well.
Very nice.
Yeah, so I was teaching up until last year. So it's nice to actually voice for something that targets that audience as well. So I love that.
Even though when you talk about what it is, it's like, oh, it's really cool apparently, and it has a lot of people that like it, I guess, and.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it because, like, I'm not even that familiar with it. So sometimes some of the girls come up to me and they're like, who's your favourite character? And I was like, Aphmau is my favourite character. Because I know some of the other names and obviously I've watched a few episodes of it. But, yeah, it's not something I can watch religiously, but I can admire the work that they put into it. And they do, they are run a complete business and they're really amazing to work with.
Does it feel at all like we're getting old because of big popular cool things or like things that it feels like we're too old to understand?
Oh God, maybe. In fact, my husband even said that yesterday. Just with some of the comments that I would make. He goes, you're sounding really old, babe. But even the fact that the Spyro remaster is out, I'm like, oh, all the kids of today are going to think that that's the first Spyro and that's the first CTR. And yeah, it's a little sad. And all the remasters, they're not going to see I'd hope that their parents would still show them the cartoon Aladdin. But yeah, for a lot of these kids, that's just going to be it. That's going to be the first movie. That's going to be the first game. So yeah, I feel old.
It's the next generation.
How old is old, actually? What's the number?
Oh, boy. I don't want to set one because then I'm going to cross
You'll
it.
offend people.
It's going to be bad. Yeah. 21. Oops.
Oopsie. I say that about myself. I'm like, I'm 26 and I feel old now.
Yeah. So everybody's old and everybody's young. And no, age means nothing except when it does.
That's it. Age is subjective. Until every time you reach a new decade, it's like, ugh.
Exactly. When I was in college, and even now, I have a lot of friends that want to get into voice acting. And you've probably had the question of how do you get into voice acting many times. One question I have about that, and you can talk more generally about it if you want to, for sure, but how important do you think it is to get formal training for voice acting? Especially for corporate stuff, where you have to have more of a neutral accent or something like that.
I think it's really, really important. My story doesn't necessarily defend that statement, though, because I kind of just launched into it to figure out if it was going to be for me. And I still recommend that to anyone. So if you haven't had training and you can afford a crappy little $150 USB mic or something and you just want to give it a go and your room's not treated, do that because there are websites available for that exact thing. You might not necessarily be cast, but the idea is you're giving it a go, you're understanding how your voice sounds when it's recorded back to you, you're starting to learn mic placement, you're starting to learn how to interpret different characters. And so for that level, I don't think you need training because training is really expensive. So if you can just get a microphone and a pop filter and you have some free software like Audacity, just give it a go. So some places where you can do that is the Voice Acting Club and the Casting Call Club and Newgrounds as well, obviously. They're the only places I personally would recommend at that particular level. If you do happen to get cast for a couple of things and you've treated your room just a little bit with blankets and pillows and that sort of thing, and you've built a very tiny portfolio and you've decided you want to give this a bit of a go and see if you can reach that next tier, then I would personally start seeking training. If you have decided in your head that you want to do this, that's the level in which you should seek it. Beforehand, I don't think it's necessary. You just need to have a little bit of a play because you don't want to be asking your coach, oh, how do I do this on Audacity? Or those sorts of questions. It's not relevant. But in terms of seeking out corporate reads and commercial reads, yes. And I would sincerely recommend that being in Australia as well because that is the main market. So I've received training off Abby Holmes. So I did, I'm hoping it's going to be ongoing, but I've just had one session with her so far because it was quite recent.
Okay.
But I would recommend that type of training because I need to have a complete mental shift when I go from video game work to a commercial or corporate job because my reads are very high energy and I can't necessarily bring that to a commercial read because the commercial world in Australia and America is very different. In America, it's a lot more volume. It's not as natural a read, whereas in Australia, it is strip everything back, get really close to the mic, lower volume. The sound should really come from chest to head. It shouldn't be from your diaphragm necessarily because you don't want to be producing that level of sound. And I think that you really need training for that because I was winging it for a very, very long time and then I've started seeking training and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it's the complete opposite of video game work.
Sounds intimate. It almost sounds like you're going in to do an audiobook or something. You have to be really close for everything.
Yeah, it is. And it's just like they just want real people, honestly. In the market here, they're just like, no, just talk. So they kind of want people off the street to do it, but with nice voices and a slight level of confidence. So it's really strange. It's like you need training to strip back what you feel is a amount of training. It's odd.
Surprisingly hard to be completely natural on camera or on a microphone. When you have that public platform like that, your brain, if you're not trained, goes to show mode and you start talking like this.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it was weird because with the video game work, like I would still love training for that. I haven't really done very much for video game work, but I find it completely essential for commercial and corporate because it's such a different world and you're stripping back everything you thought that you knew. Because I personally know that when I went into commercial work, I thought it was all very, very broadcast, like just all from the diaphragm, and they were just like, just get rid of it. Nope, too much, too high pitched, too, which is me as a person, because when they say do it conversational, I'm like, well, my tone is pretty much quite high pitched, quite dynamic.
Yeah, you're a happy person. You have a high energy
so
way
they're like,
of conversing. That's your personality.
Yeah, but for some people, it might be a matter of say it all with a smile, and for my personal direction is get rid of the smile. Or just smile at particular words.
Say it with a frown.
But sometimes I do need to do that because it just sounds too much. It is too, it's too retail all the time or too hard sell. But yeah, I think that everybody needs direction for that type of work because it's going to be different from person to person.
When you're talking to somebody about voice acting and they talk about wanting to get into it or maybe to get into commercial reads and stuff like that, do you ever have to tell people, look, you think you sound natural, but you don't. You sound like you.
For commercial reads, look, I try not to have too many opinions when it comes to those kinds of reads because I'm still learning so much myself. I still think I'm in a very precarious position for it. I'm in the midst of, I finished my new commercial demo. So I've been working with an amazing voice talent in Australia, and he's been doing this for 20 plus years, and he's very, very prominent in the commercial world. So I've actually just finished up my demo with him, and I'm waiting to get it produced. But that's kind of what I mean. I still feel I'm quite new in this world. So I don't have, in this Australian world, I'm still quite new. So I try not to have a coaching approach to voiceover at all. I just feel like I'm not quite at that place just yet. And even with video games. But I do like to direct. So when I do conventions, I don't coach, but I do go in with, look, this is my roadmap. If you want to, feel free to follow it.
I have a fun technical question that I like to grill people on. How do you deal with the mouthiness? How do you deal with that sounds when you're in the mic?
Well, 1, being very warmed up. 2, always having water with you. And 3 is Granny Smith apples. I sound really congested this morning. I was like, is that what prompted you? Because it's so cold here at the moment. I've got a scarf around me. But yeah, Granny Smith apples are amazing because it's got a small amount of acidity, which gets rid of the extra saliva in your mouth. But just making sure that when you're staying dehydrated, if you are dehydrated as well, you should be starting to drink water the night before to be ready for a session the next day as well. Because overnight your mouth gets really, really dried out. But they're the 3 main things that I recommend, as well as a bonus 4th, which is don't have dairy. I have this curse whenever it is past dinner time and I'm ready to go into the freezer to get an ice cream, that is when I'll get an email for a job, because that's when America starts waking up, right? And it's just this thing, and it's like I'm holding the ice cream and I'm like, do I do it or not? And it's happened to me multiple times, so many times you wouldn't believe it. But yeah, it's like, do I do it? Do I not? But that's my little curse at the moment. But that's what I would recommend. Granny
Smith apple right before you record? Is that kind of like a right before you start? I'm totally just asking for myself now.
Oh, yeah. So I just, I don't even like Granny Smith apples, but I force myself to do it if it's a really important day. So I just slice it up and I'll have one before I start. And then while I'm recording, if it's a long form narration sort of thing, I'll just be having some slices.
Interesting.
But yeah, it works quite immediately. Not for all day, but just, it gets you through that session, which is awesome. And the isotrope declicker as well. It's amazing. It's just literally 2 clicks. Sorry, not mouth clicks, but 2 clicks of the mouse. And it gets rid of, if you have a minute recording, it might get rid of 100 clicks. Or at least that's in my case, because I'm pretty clicky.
You've done a lot of roles. You've been a lot of people.
What is a role?
You've been a lot of people. What is a type of role that you've never played before that you'd like to?
Ooh, a few months ago, it was my goal to voice in for little boys. It was just something I wanted to do because I do sound very feminine. So I just didn't know if I could pull it off, but I've recently met that goal with 2 boy roles.
Wait, how does that sound? Give it to me.
Hi, I'm kind of zoomy. Sorry, it's like really, really loud.
A big thank you to Aimee for joining me, and thank you to you guys for listening. I wanted to shout out something that she is doing soon that you can see her at. If you were in Australia, Aimee is doing a couple of panels at Smash, which is a convention in Sydney, the weekend of July 13th and 14th. So that Saturday, she is going to be talking about how to get into character voice work. And then that Sunday, she is co-hosting with a guy named Nate Gothard, and they are plugging Australian game devs, and they're actually doing mock auditions, which sounds fun. You can win a prize if you go there. And the game devs in particular are at Brimstone Brawler, at Invert Mouse, and at Laxdot if you want to look up those in advance. Do you guys have any thoughts you'd like to share about this episode? Please leave a review on Newgrounds, and I might read some of it at the top of the next show. You heard me do that for the last episode at the top of this show. I thought it was super fun. You can join our Discord server at bit.ly/Grounds Patrol. You can follow us on Twitter at Grounds Patrol. You can follow me on Newgrounds and Twitter at WillKMR. Finally, thank you to Waterflame for the use of his song Below. It is our wonderful theme song that I jam out to every time. Our next episode is July 24th. I am going to go buy a big bag of green apples. Until next time, stay creative.